Hey, I'm back to discuss the short story I read yesterday, and that story was The Great Elevator. And it was a fun story that I wrote when I was participating in the 2022 Clarion West Write-a-thon Flash Fiction Challenge. And we had a writing prompt each week, and then we'd all write to it. We were separated into little groups, and then we gave each other positive feedback on the stories that we read. And it was all done through a Discord channel. It was really fun. I highly recommend participating in any of Clarion West's offerings because it's just a really good writing group and writing place to be able to do things. Very positive, very encouraging. So I recommend it for that reason. So this story, I think the prompt was that the characters had to be placed in a small confined space together to see what they would do. And that's where I kind of came up with the elevator. And then I started thinking, but I don't want it to be just any elevator. I want it to be an elevator that has something to do with a planet where there's people who are regulated into different parts of society and there's some classism, and the elevator is a symbol for, in a way, for that classism and the different economic status of different characters. And so I wanted my main character to be a mechanic and a young woman, and I wanted one of the other characters to be an engineer, and I had reasons for that. I have family members who are in the trades, and I also have family members who are engineers. And I think it's interesting to hear different people talk about different things. I grew up with my dad as an airplane mechanic, and he would say things like, oh, those engineers, they just sit up there in the office, they don't do anything. We do all the work. We're fixing the planes. We know how the engine actually works because we understand the rules of mechanics. And he'd talk about how the engineers only had book knowledge most of the time. And he respected the engineers who had mechanical knowledge as well as book knowledge. But if they just spouted theory at him, he'd be like, yeah. He'd probably smile and nod, but then he'd not take their advice. So there's definitely some of that classism, I think, really alive in our society today. And I think that we often think that we know best, right? Like it's a common flaw for most of humanity to be like, well, I know best, and somebody else is like, well, I know best, and then we have these disagreements about who actually knows best. And maybe what would be best is if we work together, right? And brought on all the knowledge that we had in onto one planning table and figured things out from there. But anyway, and so I think it's interesting to kind of think about that. And I've actually also met people who've moved from one part of a trade into an engineering type field or a management type position, and it's interesting to see how their views change about the whole process when they do that, and they become a little more open-minded, and they do definitely want to have more of that open approach. My husband started out life as an electrician. Now he's an electrical engineer, and then he became a supervised electrical engineer. So he has a very different idea of how things should happen within a certain type of electrical system because he's seen it from these different angles at different times in his life. And I hear him talk about it, and it just kind of fascinates me. I am not an engineer, I'm not a tradeswoman, but I think it's interesting to think about how all the trades and how all the engineers kind of work to create structures in our society that we use for everyday work. So anyway, that's all the stuff that went into the Great Elevator, just stuff from my life, stuff from my imagination. I really wanted to have this kind of a little bit of semi-romantic meetup. It's not really truly a romantic meetup in the space of this short story, but I wanted to have a little bit of that feel in there too because I was kind of playing around with that idea. And I love the idea that they're going to go on a quest together. And I love that there's a book that she loves that tells her about, creatures on Earth potentially that she's never seen, even though she lives in the housing area of this great elevator that's on this gas giant type planet. So there's supposed to be little threads in there, like maybe these are colonists, like, or at least, like 1,000 years in the future type colonists who are on this planet, and and again, they've somehow gotten into society where there's just generations of people who work the same jobs and do the same thing over and over again. And because I think that can be something that we struggle with too, where it can be good, right? You can pass on knowledge to the next generation, but then also, if we don't allow people to move from job to job, I think a society can become stagnant and we lose creativity in that. So anyway, those are, again, lots of ideas that went into that short story. So it's like, yeah, when I write a short story, it's not necessarily less than a novel as far as all the world building and all the ideas that go into it. It just comes out in kind of a smaller form. So I hope you enjoyed the story. And if you like this video, you like these videos in general, please click like and subscribe. I will be back here tomorrow with another short story, and the day after that with a short story explanation of that one. So this is what I'm doing this during this time with the Rumble channel. I'll be reading short stories and doing little bits of behind the scenes about them for the first quarter of 2025. And then I'll be moving into a series of posts and episodes about a novella that I've written. So just so you know what's coming up next, that's what's happening. I'm Tyrene, and this is Tyrene's Tales. It's one of my podcasts. It's actually kind of part of one of my podcasts too. I actually also podcast with a show called The Truth About Storytelling that's just mainly about writing, like almost completely about writing. So if you're interested in that, look me up at any podcast place and you'll find me with The Truth About Storytelling too. So thanks for joining me. See you around next time.